the economy. Our political dream team is here live to talk about this all on this Friday night on The Source. It's great to have every one of you. Mr. Mayor, I mean, seeing these two messages just days apart, obviously Trump's was kind of a prebuttal to what we heard from Harris today. Neither one exactly comprehensive. What did you make of the contrast in what you heard from them?
Well, what I'm seeing is Kamala Harris continuing to expand the impact that her campaign is having. In other words, the first few weeks, she was new, she was different. It was a relief for a lot of people, with all due respect to President Biden, that there was a new candidate. But now she's filling in the blanks very, very effectively. And she's not just talking about the economy. She's talking about it in a way that actually gets to people's hearts. Look, voting is extremely emotional. When she says, I'm going after price gouging, which is a perfect message from a former prosecutor, a former attorney general, that's the kind of thing people want to hear. They've been suffering, and they feel like elites just don't get it. And so now we're seeing a Kamala Harris who's compassionate, gets what people are going through, but is also talking about doing something tough about it.
Well, what do you make, Jamal, though, of what a lot of the Trump campaign people are tweeting tonight, which are clips from that speech of her talking about where things stand now and saying, this is basically an ad for us because it's saying, here's how far behind families still feel because of prices that they're paying at the grocery store, at the gas station, for housing?
Yeah, first, I couldn't stop laughing when you were talking about President Trump doing another economy speech. It's like, it's infrastructure week again, and we're just gonna, maybe this time we'll actually talk about the economy. Look, I think what was important about what the vice president did today was a couple things. First of all, she's somebody who really lives this, right? Unlike maybe President Biden, who is a great person, but she has family, she has friends who are going through this right now, people who have kids who are in school, she has, family members who are in elementary school, and she's got people who are trying to start their businesses and buy their first homes. So these aren't things she has to read in a report. At night, when people call her friends and her family, these are the concerns that they raise.
So you think she's a better messenger, potentially, than Biden on this?
Oh, clearly she is. I mean, but regardless of her this sort of performance, it's something she understands like deeply inside of her, and I think in a way that people probably didn't really expect when they thought they were going to get her as a candidate. But she did a couple things today. She talked about the middle class, which is not something, frankly, having worked for her for a while, that she talked about a lot, talking about the middle class. She named, this is the Republicans talking about this, she named the prices. She talked about the price of beef in the grocery store, right? That's something I think people were looking for President Biden to do, to hear him talk about the problems they were facing. And sometimes people just want to feel acknowledged. And it's one of the things, frankly, Donald Trump was able to do pretty well for the last few cycles. Is he talked about the pain people were feeling and acknowledged that. So they said, oh, this guy actually knows what's going on in our lives. I think she did that very well today.
Was Trump able to do that this week, though? Because in his speech focused on the economy, which has long been something that he planned to run against President Biden on, I mean, he talked about some tariffs maybe going up to 20%, which would obviously have a huge impact on consumers here at home.
Well, it would hurt consumers both in cost and also supply, because all of a sudden we wouldn't be bringing those things in.
Did his economic message even break through, though, this week? Because a lot of the focus was on what he said about Harris.
No, and I think part of it is the struggle that we're now seeing within the Trump campaign. They essentially, and I think smartly, put props on there to keep him on message, right? And so when Donald Trump said, I haven't seen Cheerios in a long time, I saw Cheerios for breakfast yesterday. I bought them, or this morning, I bought them yesterday. And when I was at that grocery store, 3 or 4 times I said, hey, we're paying that much now for this product. That's what every American is going through every day, whether it's a grocery store, a movie theater that they go or don't go to, a restaurant they go or don't go to. And this is an opportunity for Trump, if he can stay on message and say, this is the Biden-Harris agenda. This is the result of their administration. They're still an administration together, but he has to be focused on it. And the challenge that the Trump campaign has right now is you have the faction that, I think very smartly, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita especially, want Trump to stay focused on message. And you have the new crew that's come in, and their motto is, let Trump be Trump. And the problem is Trump can be disciplined when he wants to be, but he usually doesn't want to be. And that's when things veer off track.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because J.D. Vance was asked about this today while he was out on the campaign trail, this idea of Trump needing to stay focused more on the message, which, Republicans are saying, they're looking into the camera here when they're on with us and saying, please focus on the issues. This is what Senator Vance had to say about that.
I don't think the president needs to pivot, and if I told him that, I can guess what he'd say. I'd much rather have a political candidate who I disagreed with 25% of the time, but was a real human being and was willing to speak off the cuff, than to have somebody like Kamala Harris who hides behind a teleprompter and doesn't speak to the American people directly unless she's got a script in front of her.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between speaking to the people and insulting them 100% of the time. And I think that he sucked all the air out of anything he talked about with regard to the economy this week because he continues to call her the wrong name and mispronounce it and continues to lob insults at her. I thought she was very effective today in sprinkling in her personal story, how she worked at McDonald's and how her mom saved for 10 years to be able to buy her first house. But I have to be honest, look, she's not going to own up to the policies that Biden and Harris had together. She needs to pivot from that, and that was smart. She sounded a little bit like a Republican today. She was calling about cutting regulations and cutting other things that are kind of out of Donald Trump's playbook. And this is the same person who in 2019 was completely against fracking. So I think it's really important for her to continue to give messages to the American public because they don't know her that well. And what Donald Trump's going to continue to do is call her what he called her today, Comrade Kamala goes full communist. She needs to continue to speak to the American people, pivot away from some of those more extreme policies, and try to apply herself to independence.
Think about what happens when you're in the vice presidency. When she was attorney general, she used to investigate companies, right? Like, that's the job. You go after them for fraud. She talked about some of that now. But now, over the course of the last couple of years, she's meeting with companies. She's looking at what's happening abroad. She's looking at tariff and trade questions. She's going around and actually seeing small businesses and how they grow. I think over the last couple of years, you've seen an American politician and leader really grow into this job in a way that now we're seeing the fruit of as she travels around the country and people react to her.
I also got to tell you, I hear your point about him calling her comrade and all. That's dated. Like, that is not what
I'm not saying I agree with it. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying that on the one hand, she sounded like a Republican to me in parts of what she said today, but he's going to call her communist.
Yeah, but I'm saying when he does it, it makes him sound totally out of touch, first of all, because it's an entirely different world. It's not the Cold War anymore. But more importantly, here's someone, I think this is what Kamala Harris is doing very, very well. Folks are angry. They feel that they have been left behind these recent years by both parties in many ways. They feel that they have been suffering the pandemic, to say the least, but they see these prices go up. And unfortunately for Joe Biden, Bidenomics, he had a point on the bigger scheme of things, perhaps, but it sounded out of touch with people's lived experience. Where she comes in and says, hey, this is corporate America taking advantage of you. If he wants to call that communist, he can do that all day long, because the typical voter is pissed off at corporate America because they see these prices go crazy. So if he says, no, that's the Biden administration, and she says, no, that's the company with the label of the thing you're holding in your hand that costs too much money, she has a chance to make her message get through.
Well, Doug, you make an interesting point about the people around Trump and those who, the Susie Wiles that have a very well-executed plan. They've been around him, ever since he basically left office, and others who we're seeing others come back into the fold. People like Corey Lewandowski, someone who was, a senior advisor on his campaign back in 2016, and is now Trump confirming that he's back in the fold. What does that tell you about what's happening inside that campaign?
Yeah, I know Jamal's going to agree with me on this. Anytime a campaign has a little bit of trouble, the candidate reaches out to somebody from the past, somebody that he trusts, somebody that's sort of a security blanket for them. That's what's happening right now. And I'll tell you, I was so heartened to hear what J.D. Vance said about somebody who disagrees with me 25% of the time, I'm okay with, because every House Republican conference meeting I was in, the rise of the Freedom Caucus was anybody who disagrees with me 25% of the time is a heretic, right? And Vance is right. But the challenge that they face is as Kamala Harris is morphing into this new role is, how do we criticize her? Is she the flip-flopper, to your point about fracking and so many issues over the past week or two, where she's come to a very new place? or is she the committed radical leftist? They can't be both simultaneously. You have to pick one.
That's a great point, because the question also is what this is going to look like on the debate stage, not just when they're both in the same state. Trump has brought in Tulsi Gabbard to help him with debate prep.
Never in a Republican House Republican conference meeting, just to be clear. She's always in the Democratic meetings.
He left the Democratic Party 2 years ago, obviously ran in the primary. So, but they viewed her as successful against Harris on the debate stage because of moments like this one.
It's unfortunate that we have someone on the stage who is attempting to be the Democratic nominee for President of the United States, who during the Obama administration spent 4 years full-time on Fox News criticizing President Obama.
What Senator Harris is doing is unfortunately continuing to traffic in lies and smears and innuendos because she cannot challenge the substance of the argument that I'm making, the leadership and the change that I'm seeking to bring.
I spent my entire career standing mostly in a courtroom speaking 5 words, Kamala Harris for the people.
See, that's where I think the Republicans will be in a box here. A former prosecutor as the main candidate, and then the football coach, National Guardsman as the vice presidential candidate. You cannot paint them as communists. You cannot paint them as radicals. I mean, for God's sakes, if Tim Walz is a radical, then the whole country's a radical. The Republicans can't try to play othering of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It's not going to work.
But that's why she needs to do more debates. The
Right,
fact
I
that she
agree.
announced this week that she's only doing this one debate on September 10th, I think is a huge
I'm with you.
mistake.
And behind
because
the scenes,
people
that
do
seems
not
kind
know
of-
her. And if she wants to get away from the impression of what he's going to paint her as an extremist, she needs to get to the heart of the American people and tell them that she's not like that. Her line today, new way forward. I mean, she really is trying to go out and get away from the blame that maybe the Biden administration faced for where we are in the economy.
And when so
Should
much
she
of the
do multiple
country feels
debates?
that we're moving in the wrong direction, your roadmap for the Trump campaign is there for you. People are mad about prices. Don't say inflation or transitory. Say prices and costs. They're mad about the border. Talk about those things. The other stuff and the mispronunciations, sideshows.
Well, let's remember, she hasn't done a debate since she talked to Mike Pence 4 years ago. So Democrats have a little bit of an expectation that she's going to leave Donald Trump in a puddle of tears going, I didn't order the code red, I ordered the code red. But that's probably not what's going to happen in the course of that debate.
She's going to say convicted
But so
felon
listen, she's gonna,
over and over,
she's gonna
and
be
she's going to
fine.
win
She's
with
going
just
to be
that.
fine, but we need to all level set our expectations. And let's remember this. This debate is not going to be, not just the debate, but this rest of this campaign is not really going to be about just the economy. It's going to be about abortion rights. It's going to be about democracy. So the economy is a piece of it, but it's not all of it.
Yeah. What is it? 80 days left? 80 more panels
We're
for
almost
us to
there.
talk
There we go.
about this.
We're ready.
Everyone, thank you for being here on a Friday night.